हम हिटलर से बहुत चिढ़ते हैं बिकॉज किताबों में बताया गया कि हिटलर वॉज द मोस्ट क्रूअल पर्सन. 6 million Jews were gas chambered, killed by Hitler in matter of few months. We talk about Gaza, we talk about other countries, we don't know about this event जिसके बारे में आज हम बात करना जा रहे हैं, 1971 का हिंदू होलोकॉस्ट, जिसमें हिटलर ने जितने लोगों को कुछ महीने में मारा था उससे कुछ आधे लोगों को 30 लाख मोस्टली हिंदूज को पाकिस्तानी आर्मी ने कुछ ही हफ्तों में बचर कर दिया था. We are as good as our knowledge of history. We probably go from one place to another looking for safer heavens. We think, oh, we have moved from India to US and Europe and things are going to be better. I have no grouse for our expat NRIs because बहुत एक्टिविज्म बाहर से अभी भारत में आ रहा है, इंपोर्ट हो रहा है, तो मैं तो नमन करता हूं. But this information has to be seamlessly passed on from generation to generation. और ज्यादा समय नहीं लेते हुए ऐसे ही एक महाविद्वान, महाक्रांतिकारी सज्जन पुरुष को, जिनको मैं काफी बार इनसे आशीर्वाद मिला है, सरदार रवि रंजन जी से शुरुआत करता हूं. सरदार साहब झटका मूवमेंट के लिए, हलालोनॉमिक्स के लिए प्रसिद्ध हैं. सिंधु वाटर ट्रीटी के बारे में इनका जो ज्ञान है वो अनपैरेलल्ड है, और मेरे ख्याल से जो एडवाइजरी टीम है बहुत सारे राज्यों की, उनका एक सिंगल थिंक टैंक इज एनकैप्सुलेटेड विद इन सरदार रवि रंजन सिंह जी. सर कुछ ज्ञान दें, 1971 के युद्ध में क्या एट्रोसिटीज हुई थी. अगर आपने एक ब्लड टेलीग्राम नाम की किताब पढ़ी है, जो कि एक शायद मिस्टर रॉस ने लिखी थी रिगार्डिंग हेनरी किसिंजर एंड निक्सन्स रोल इन you know making Pakistan Senate sit in its lap and do the pogrom of Hindus in Bangladesh. Kindly share some light जी. धन्यवाद जी.
जी आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. और एक और धन्यवाद, पहले मैं आपके पीछे चतुर्वर्ण देख रहा हूं जिसे तिरंगा कहते हैं. असल में इसमें 4 रंग हैं. ये चतुर्वर्ण लगाने के लिए धन्यवाद. वैसे तो हमारा रंग तो भगवा है, केसरी है, पर जब तक ये फ्लैग है हम इसको नमन करते हैं. कमिंग स्ट्रेट टू 1971, it didn't start in 71. In fact, the separation movement of Bangladesh started even before Pakistan was conceived. I mean, it was conceived even before it was born. 1946-47 में भी ढाका में जलूस निकलते थे पाकिस्तान के खिलाफ. वो अलग मुस्लिम कंट्री तो चाहते थे मगर पाकिस्तान के साथ नहीं होना चाहते थे. बड़े उसका मेन रीजन था द लैंग्वेज. एक आर्टिफिशियल लैंग्वेज को, उर्दू को, जो अच्छी हो सकती है एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन के लिए, इसके लिए, पर वो किसी की मदर टंग नहीं थी, उसको बनाया जा रहा था नेशनल लैंग्वेज. और क्योंकि बंगाली गिनती में सबसे ज्यादा थे तो वो बंगला को नेशनल लैंग्वेज चाहते थे बने. भारत में अगर हिंदी है तो इसलिए नहीं कि तमिल कोई कम है किसी से या कोई और भाषा किसी से कम है, पर क्योंकि मैक्सिमम लोग हिंदी बोलते हैं तो इसमें एक सुविधा रहती है. शुरू हुआ था और 70 और इट वाज इनिशियली, मतलब अगेंस्ट हिंदूज के खिलाफ एक माइंडसेट तो रहा ही है, वो तो रहा है, बट इनिशियली इट वाज बंगला वर्सेस पंजाबी, वो था. और क्योंकि बंगाली जो ढाका यूनिवर्सिटी में थे या जहां जहां जो प्रोफेसर्स थे, तो दे हैड डबल क्राइम, दे वर कमिटिंग द डबल क्राइम, वन बीइंग बोर्न बंगाली एंड सेकंड बीइंग रिमेनिंग हिंदू. तो वो डबल टारगेटेड हुए. ऐसा बात नहीं कि वहां पे मुस्लिम बंगाली को उन्होंने टारगेट नहीं करा. और वो जेनोसाइड जो हुआ उसमें हम अपना रोल जो है बड़ा पॉजिटिव मान के चलते हैं। जैसे आपने कहा बहुत सी चीजें हमें बताई जाती हैं हिस्ट्री में, यस, एंड वी बिलीव आवरसेल्व्स एज हीरोज ऑफ 1971 वॉर। यस, इट्स ट्रू टू सम एक्सटेंट सो फार इंडियन आर्मी इज कंसर्न। मगर उस समय की पॉलिटिकल लीडरशिप जो थी वो 71 के बाद जो बांग्लादेश में हिंदुओं के ऊपर हुआ उसके लिए 71 के शिमला एग्रीमेंट के डिसीजंस जिम्मेदार हैं जी।
can you restate the same thing जी?
1971 में we see ourselves as heroes of the war, saviors of Bangladesh. It's true to in case of army, but political leadership का जो decision था, they were disastrous. It was, I don't know what to say, it was the deal, it was a surrender, or it was a compromise on the table. We lost on the table. जो जिससे हम बड़े 1972 का एग्रीमेंट बताते हैं। 71 वॉर तक पाकिस्तानी आर्मी कर रही थी, उसके बाद उनके स्टूजेस कर रहे थे या बांग्लादेशी कर रहे थे। वो क्यों हुआ ये हमको समझना पड़ेगा, और उससे पहले भी क्यों हो रहा था। इनिशियली इट वाज नॉट बंगालीज जो अपोज कर रहे थे, इट वाज द पंजाबी आर्मी, पंजू की आर्मी जस्ट रादर टू से। और उसमें टारगेट हिंदू ज्यादा हो रहे थे, मुस्लिम भी हो रहे थे, क्योंकि यूनिवर्सिटी में अच्छे अच्छे प्रोफेसर्स, जो टॉप प्रोफेसर्स थे उस समय, एचओडीज वगैरह, वो हिंदू थे और उनको वो टारगेट करना चाह रहे थे फॉर टू रीजंस। वन इज टू किल बंगाली एंड अदर इज टू किल द हिंदू इंटेलेक्चुअल। इसको हम जब 71 की जेनोसाइड को देखते हैं, हम उसको 71 पे लाके खत्म कर देते हैं, मगर 71 के जो कॉन्सिक्वेंसेस हुए, जो फॉल आउट हुआ, वो आज तक वहां का हिंदू भुगत रहा है। 71 तो एक वॉर थी, उसमें हुआ, हिंदू भी टारगेट हुए, मुस्लिम भी, वहां के बंगाली टारगेट हुए, खत्म हुआ। मगर उसके बाद जिस बांग्लादेश ने हिंदुओं को अपना सेवियर मानना था, उसने वो नहीं माना। उसका रीजन ये है, पॉलिटिकल लीडरशिप ऑफ दैट टाइम बिट्रेड बांग्लादेश। ये बहुत बड़ी हमने एक भूल करी। मिलिट्री लीडरशिप जो चाहती थी इनके ऊपर, देखिए, देयर वर टू वॉरिंग साइड्स, वन वाज वेस्ट पाकिस्तान एंड अदर वाज ईस्ट पाकिस्तान, और उनकी प्रोविजनल गवर्नमेंट थी शेख मुजीबुर रहमान की, एंड वी वर फाइटिंग मुफ्ती वहानी, मुजीब वहानी बना के हम उनके साथ लड़ रहे थे। मगर जब प्रिजनर्स ऑफ वॉर हमारे, हम जिसे 93,000 कहते हैं, एक्चुअली उससे बहुत ज्यादा हैं, हमने बिना उनको पूछे हुए, बिना उनसे बात करे हुए, हमने वो हैंड ओवर कर दिया। Who had a opportunity to be the leaders of Bangladesh, उन्हें एज अ ट्रेटर देखा गया। ये एक हिस्टोरिक मिस्टेक थी, और उसके ऊपर उसके बाद एट्रोसिटीज 71 में हुई और आज तक हो रही हैं। ये जो 1 लाख हमने फौजी छोड़े, उनकी वार, उन्होंने एट्रोसिटीज किस पे की थी? बंगालियों पे की थी। उन्होंने यूनिवर्सिटीज कहाँ की जलाई थी? बंगाल की, ईस्ट पाकिस्तान की जलाई थी। वो किनके वार क्रिमिनल्स थे? ईस्ट पाकिस्तान के। वी जस्ट कैप्चर्ड देम, और ना तो हमने अंडर द लॉ बांग्लादेश के यहाँ उनको दिया, अंडर देयर गवर्नमेंट, उनके लॉ में ट्रायल हो, ना हमने यूएन को करा। हम यूएन को दिया, हमने चुपचाप वो आदमी लौटा दिए पाकिस्तान को, फॉर व्हाटसोएवर केमिस्ट्री हैपेंड देयर, वो या वो पहले की कुछ चीजें होंगी। और वो जो लौटाना था, हम कैसे भुगत रहे हैं आज तक, जो ईस्ट और वेस्ट दोनों साइड जो जेनोसाइड हो रहा है, दिस इज वन ऑफ द मेजर रीजंस। जो वही आर्मी जाके बलूचों पे टूटी, क्योंकि उन्होंने भी प्रूव करना था सरेंडर आर्मी नहीं है, हम भी किसी को मार सकते हैं। और एक एक इंसिडेंस हम अगर इसका देखें तो उस समय ढाका यूनिवर्सिटीज में कैसे हिंदू प्रोफेसर्स को सेग्रीगेट किया गया और मुस्लिम प्रोफेसर्स को सेग्रीगेट किया गया, और उन्हें पाकिस्तानी पंजाबी आर्मी ने मारा। तो दैट वाज टू उनके बीच में एक स्प्लिट करने के लिए। और इसके सारे जिम्मेदारी जो है उस समय की पॉलिटिकल लीडरशिप के ऊपर है। और pre-71 वॉर, ये तो जो उस समय की लीडरशिप थी वो तो उसको बहुत पहले करना चाह रही थी, विच सैम बहादुर, जनरल मानिक शॉ रिफ्यूज टू सरेंडर। अगर उस समय की पॉलिटिकल लीडरशिप की मानी जाती है और जनरल मानिक शॉ की जगह कोई हल्का होता तो वी वुड हैव टेरिबली लॉस्ट टेरिटरी एंड वी वुड हैव टेरिबली लॉस्ट मैन। सो थैंक्स टू जनरल मानिक शॉ जो हम ये जीते। और उसके बाद जो जेनोसाइड हुआ, 3 स्टेजेस हैं, pre-71, ड्यूरिंग वॉर एंड आफ्टर, जो आज तक चल रहा है। और आज तक चलने वाले में काफी हद तक जिम्मेदारी हमारे उस पॉलिटिकल डिसीजन की है। 71 वॉर में पाकिस्तान ने टारगेट किया हिंदू प्रोफेसर्स को, हिंदू स्टूडेंट्स को, हिंदू वुमेन को और मुस्लिम्स को भी किया। यस, ऑफ कोर्स देयर वर सेवरल रीजंस के हिंदू क्यों ज्यादा टारगेट हुए। एक तो दे वर प्रोस्परस, तो लूट करेंगे तो आप एक प्रोस्परस घर की लूट करेंगे। और दूसरा, क्योंकि पढ़े लिखे ज्यादा थे तो इंटेलेक्चुअल मारा जाएगा, तो उसमें हिंदू मारा गया। ये डिस्क्रिमिनेशन भी थी और इनडिस्क्रिमिनेट भी था, दोनों ही चीजें थी। और ये रीजन रहा। और इसके हमारे पास कोई स्टैटिस्टिक्स अवेलेबल नहीं है। 93,000 कहते हैं, पर ये 1 लाख से ज्यादा सोल्जर्स थे जो आर्मी एंड सिविलियंस थे जो हमने कैप्चर करे। और हमारे जो 240 या 38 सोल्जर्स कैप्चर हुए थे उसकी हमने परवाह नहीं करी, जिसमें से आज तक देयर आर मिसिंग पर्संस जो उन्होंने वापस ही नहीं दिए। ये हमारी वो लीडरशिप रही। और इसी तरह ये तो वो लोग हैं जो पाकिस्तानी आर्मी, जिनके पास हमारे पास रिकॉर्ड्स है कि पाकिस्तानी बहुत सारे हमारे जो मुक्ति वाहिनी में जो लोग गए थे, मुक्ति वाहिनी के साथ साथ उस समय मुजी वाहिनी भी थी, उन लोगों का कोई रिकॉर्ड नहीं है। और बाद में जो सेवियर्स थे, यानी हिंदू आर्मी, यानी इंडियन आर्मी, आई नॉट से हिंदू आर्मी, इंडियन आर्मी, जो हिंदू जिसमें उस समय थे, और उसी हिंदू को बाद में टारगेट किया गया बिकॉज ऑफ आवर मोस्ट बायस्ड पॉलिटिकल डिसीजन। और ये दिस आई ब्लेम पोस्ट 71 जो हो रहा है, 71 को हम 2 पार्ट्स में देखते हैं, वार एंड आफ्टर वार। उसके बाद जो हुआ उसकी जिम्मेदारी पूरी हमारे ऊपर आती है, हमारी पॉलिटिकल लीडरशिप पे। जी, मैं चाहूंगा कि अभी आपने सिंध वाटर की बात करी थी, तो जम्मू से जो मित्र मेरे बैठे हुए हैं, ये ही नोज मच मोर देन आई नो, बिकॉज ये उसमें खुद थे। इस पे मैं चाहूंगा और कोई बात करे, फिर हम उसको आगे कंटिन्यू कर सकते हैं।
We have with us Shri Ankur Sharma ji, Advocate Ankur Sharma ji from Ekjut Jammu, President of Ekjut Jammu, and much more known for his role in Roshni Act. The words I would say is that he saved Jammu from becoming another Kashmir, another deathbed for Hindus in Jammu. I solely credit it to his work, because even the people in the central government, in the ministries, they were not aware, as to my understanding. So, Ankur ji, are you there? Are you ready to join us?
There seems to be some problem with my video, which probably I'm sure I'll be able to fix it in some time, because there is some internet problem going on here, and I'm going to switch on my connection. But then, if my voice is clear, I can start.
Your voice is loud and clear, ji.
जी देखिए, so the today's topic about Hindu Holocaust या Hindu Genocide etc. और आपने अपने message में भी जो which was spread out for the purposes of audiences who had to participate in today's program, उसमें बताया था कि कितने numbers में मारा गया, किस तरीके से मारा गया। कि मुझे लगता है कि एक डिफरेंट डायमेंशन से, डिफरेंट एंगल से मैं अपनी बात रखूंगा। मैं इस बात के बारे में जागरूक करना चाहूंगा देशवासियों को कि इंडियन स्टेट रहा है 1947 से 1971 तक भी, और 71 ऑनवर्ड्स 1990s में कश्मीर, अभी 2019, 21, 22 में बंगाल और एक्सेट्रा सब जगहों पे जहां पे हिंदू जेनोसाइड हुआ है। तो देखिए, इंडियन state as a political entity has always been in denial mode about the commission of offenses against Hindus, which can be termed as Hindu genocide. 1947 में worst kind of Hindu genocide unleash किया गया, लेकिन उस पे पर्दा डालने का काम, उस जेनोसाइड को लेके डिनायल मोड में रहने का काम भारत की राजसत्ता ने किया, इंडियन स्टेट ने किया। आप 1971 में भी आ जाइए, उस समय भी आज तक भारत, इंडियन स्टेट ने जो हिंदुओं के साथ पाकिस्तान में भी हुआ, हो रहा है आज की डेट तक, या बांग्लादेश में भी जो हुआ, उसे जेनोसाइड नहीं माना। 1990s में भी जो कश्मीर में हिंदुओं के साथ हुआ, धर्म के आधार पे कत्लेआम हुआ, लाखों की संख्या में लोगों को अपने घरों से जाना पड़ा, देश में ही रेफ्यूजी बनना पड़ा, उन चीजों को भी डिस्पाइट डिमांड्स जेनोसाइड ऑफिशियली रिकॉग्नाइज नहीं किया। बंगाल में
Ankur ji, your voice is not audible as of now. Do you want to reconnect?
और ये तब हुआ, I'll repeat, ये
Ankur
तब
ji,
हुआ,
I think you might have to repeat it because your voice was probably missing.
कहाँ से कटा था मेरा?
Almost like a minute back, ji, when you said that in 1990s also the Indian government was probably not acting responsible.
Yeah, so 1990 के दशक में भी जो हिंदुओं के साथ कश्मीर में हुआ, जम्मू संभाग में हुआ, मुस्लिम मेजॉरिटी डिस्ट्रिक्ट्स ऑफ जम्मू प्रोविंस में हुआ, इस्तेमाल की गई कि ये तो डिस्प्लेस्ड लोग, जेनोसाइड को डिस्प्लेसमेंट कहा, एक्सोडस कहा, रेफ्यूजी बनना कहा, एटसेट्रा एटसेट्रा। बंगाल में भी आप 2014-15 के बाद देख लीजिए, अभी जो हत्याएं हुई, दैट कैन बी कैटेगराइज्ड एज जेनोसाइड ऑफ हिंदूज, लेकिन उसको भी जेनोसाइड नहीं माना गया। और ये तब है, मैं ये कह रहा था पहले, ये तब है जब भारत ना केवल यूएन कन्वेंशन ऑन क्राइम्स अगेंस्ट जेनोसाइड का सिग्नेटरी है, बल्कि इनिशियल प्रपोजर भी है। कन्वेंशन बनने से पहले 1946 में ही भारत ने प्रपोज किया था कि इस तरीके की कन्वेंशन बननी भी चाहिए, लेकिन नॉट 1947 हो, 1971 हो, 1990 हो, कोई भी समा हो, तो हिंदू जेनोसाइड को लेके सबसे बड़ा इंस्ट्रूमेंट डिनायल का इंडियन स्टेट ही रही है। अब मैं क्यों इस बात को सिग्निफाई कर रहा हूँ कि व्हाई डू वी नीड टू नो दैट इंडियन स्टेट इज इन डिनायल ऑफ हिंदू जेनोसाइड एंड व्हाट इज दिस, इसकी इम्प्लीकेशन क्या है, सिग्निफिकेंस क्या है इस चीज की। देखिए, जेनोसाइड एक्सपर्ट्स ये कहते हैं कि जेनोसाइड रेप्लिकेट होता है, डुप्लीकेट होता है, कंटिन्यूअस अनअबेटेड चलता रहता है अगर उसको लेके सरकारें डिनायल मोड में रहे या कोई भी सोसाइटी डिनायल मोड में रहे। तो पहली चीज, अगर इंडियन स्टेट हिंदू जेनोसाइड को लेके कंटिन्यूअसली डिनायल मोड में है सिंस 1947, तो इंडियन स्टेट एक बहुत बड़ा इंस्ट्रूमेंट है इन फैसिलिटेटिंग कंटिन्यूअस अनअबेटेड जेनोसाइड ऑफ हिंदूज outside India, which means in Afghanistan, Bangladesh and Pakistan, and within India also, जो आपने कश्मीर के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में आपने देख ही लिया कि किस तरीके से 1990 की हैपनिंग्स को रिपीट करवाया गया, अभी जब टारगेटेड किलिंग्स हुई और चुन चुन के हिंदुओं को मारा गया, और कंटिन्यूअसली अभी भी मारा जा रहा है, और 3 दिन पहले तक भी हत्याएं कश्मीर में धर्म के आधार पर की गई। बंगाल में भी आपने देखा कंटिन्यूस रहा, और यूपी में तो आपने देखा ही होगा कि लास्ट चुनाव इस बात पे लड़ा गया था कि इन जगहों को, 100 से अधिक जगहों को विद इन यूपी हम कश्मीर नहीं बनने देंगे। तो उसका क्लियरली ये मतलब था कि यूपी के अंदर भी हिंदुओं का कत्लेआम, जेनोसाइड या उनके लिए जो प्रॉब्लम्स क्रिएट की जाती हैं वो निरंतर चल रही हैं। तो एक तो भाई ये समझना बहुत जरूरी है कि स्टैटिस्टिक्स डिस्कस करने के बजाय या अपनी छाती पीटने के बजाय कि हिंदुओं का जेनोसाइड लगातार चल रहा है, state is hostile to the civilization। तो ये सब चीजें हैं जिनको देख के हम अपने कंक्लूजन्स पे पहुंचते हैं। 1947 में इंडियन स्टेट ने हिंदुओं की लाशों पे देश का बंटवारा टू नेशन थ्योरी के आधार पे एक्सेप्ट किया और साथ ही ये भी माना कि हिंदुस्तान के अंदर भी एक पाकिस्तान को पनपने देंगे। इस्लामिक स्टेट में 23-24% हिंदुओं को कहा कि आप वहीं पे रहिए पाकिस्तान में, आप यहाँ पे मत आइए, नोइंग वेल कि पाकिस्तान इज अ डिक्लेयर्ड इस्लामिक स्टेट। तो अब आपने देखा कि उनका वहां जेनोसाइड निरंतर चलता रहा और आज परिस्थिति ये है कि कुछ परसेंट, वेरी लिमिटेड, 2% से भी नीचे, 23-24% से कम होके वो यहाँ पे इतने पे पहुंच गए। और बांग्लादेश में भी यही परिस्थिति है, अफगानिस्तान की भी यही परिस्थिति है। तो इंटरनल एज वेल एज एक्सटर्नल जेनोसाइड जो है वो कंटिन्यूस रहा। एक चीज ये। दूसरा, भारत, इंडियन स्टेट ने फिर अल्टीमेटली ये तय किया कि 1947 में तो लोग जानते हैं कि सच्चाई क्या है, जिहाद की सच्चाई क्या है, इस्लामिक एक्सट्रीमिज्म की सच्चाई क्या है, टू नेशन थ्योरी की सच्चाई क्या है, कि हमारे 2 लिम्स को काट दिया गया, पाकिस्तान बना लिया गया। बांग्लादेश कोई एकेडमिक थ्योरेटिकल डिबेट तो नहीं थी कि मुसलमान देश तोड़ सकते हैं, आपके सामने था कि मुसलमानों ने देश को तोड़ दिया था और एक पाकिस्तान बनवा लिया था। तो फिर आपने कहा कि जो और ये उस बैकग्राउंड में हुआ जिस बैकग्राउंड में पाकिस्तान अल्टीमेटली बना वहां पे जहां पे पाकिस्तान की डिमांड नहीं थी। मतलब पाकिस्तान की डिमांड यूपी सेंट्रल प्रोविंसेस जिन्हें कहते थे,
Ankur ji, your voice is getting like, we are not able to hear you. So give us a little while your connection is more stable.
I think just अगले 2 मिनट में it will be stable. I have arranged it.
Yeah. So let's go to Arti ji. Rajiv Dada, in case the screen share is ready for Arti ji, can we just begin with Arti ji?
Yes.
Okay. So Arti ji, the screen share is available for you.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, thank you for joining, Arti ji. Arti ji is a very well-educated person, and right from the other side, her education mostly has taken. She's educated herself in US, I understand, from MIT. Is it right?
Yes, but I'm also an IIT.
Okay, great. So she's one of those tech brains who's now offering or giving her services to Dharma, to the country, and her project on Hindu genocide is really worth appreciation. It's like that exact bunch of information which is going to make us, jaw drop at the amount of atrocities which we have been going through. So Arti ji, the screen is over to you right now. Please go ahead. Thank you, ji.
Okay, I just wanted screen share for a few reference slides, but I want to start at the very beginning. I mean, I know people have spoken before me, but first of all, the very question of 1971 war and Hindu genocide. We're not just talking about Bangladesh genocide, because the common terminology used everywhere when we talk about this 1971 genocide is that yes, there are scholars who have started to agree that it is a genocide, but not everybody agrees that it is a Hindu genocide. And that is the part I want to emphasize on, and I'll also talk about why it should be called a genocide and how we have enough documentation to prove that. But the onus lies on the Hindu community and of course on the Bangladesh government and the Indian government to first of all recognize it as a Hindu genocide, not just as a genocide, but as a Hindu genocide. So there are of course several reasons for this genocide. One was of course the Bengali language movement, where after the partition of India, when India was broken up into Pakistan and India, and Pakistan included West Pakistan as well as East Pakistan, Urdu was the national language, and it was sort of associated with some sort of a nationalism in Pakistan, which means that the Bengalis of Bangladesh, they were being forced to use Urdu everywhere, whereas the mother tongue was of course Bengali. So that was one of the reasons. The second reason was that the West Pakistan, the government was not at all interested in even taking care of the people in Bangladesh. And there was a cyclone, I think it was called the cyclone Bhola, in which West Pakistan absolutely did not give any aid to the people of Bangladesh in that, that national calamity. And the people of Bangladesh were very, very discontent with the government. The third reason, which is actually the more important reason in this particular case, is that the Hindus of Bangladesh were seen to vote for and select the Awami League, which was seen as a little bit more sympathetic to Hindus. And they were seen as trying to vote the Pakistani government out, trying to basically build a parallel movement, a parallel lobby, which is sort of rebellious to the Pakistan government. Now, I'm not going into a whole lot of details of every fact because I think most of the people here will be familiar with it, but I'm just giving a brief background so we understand what we are actually talking about. We are not talking in thin air. So these are some of the factors. Now, the important point is that when we talk about the Bangladesh episode, we think it is like just one episode, but it is not really like that. If you see that there are actually 10 stages of a genocide, and in this particular episode, the 1971 Hindu Genocide, we see all the 10 stages happening over a period of time, maybe you can even say decades, but we have observed it in the past in 1971, and I'm not going to take the focus away from Bangladesh right now. If you see after 1971 also, the same patterns of the 10 stages of a genocide, they are still continuing. And I will come to that also as to why that is. So first of all, a few facts that, in the Bangladesh, the country, the East Pakistan, let's call it for now, the population of Hindus was something roughly between 18 to 19% at that point of time, just before the war. And the official figure for massacre in the 1971 war, which lasted around 9 months or something, was 3 million. This is the official figure. Now, out of those 3 million, 2.5 million people who were killed were Hindu Bengalis. So, there is no theorem, there is no lemma, there is nothing in mathematics which will convince you that 18.5% can become 95% just like that. That means that Hindus were targeted. If indiscriminately Bangladeshis were killed, then the number of Hindus killed should have been 18.5% of 3 million. It should not have been 95% of 3 million. This is the most basic. I mean, I will argue and I will debate on this with any mathematician available. 18.5% does not become 95%. So if the population of this fact alone, this figure alone is actually enough to convince anybody with a sane logical mind that it was a persecution of Hindus, it was a persecution of Bengali Hindus. And yes, of course, we are not denying the fact that other Bangladeshis were killed, even other Indians were killed. Of course, others were also killed. We are not in any way denying that. We are just saying that the majority who were killed were Hindus and they were targeted for being Hindus. And this fact that they were targeted for being Hindus is documented, and not by some sympathetic Indian, not by some sympathetic Hindu. This fact has been documented by, as we keep referring to Gary J. Bass, who mentions it in his book. It has been acknowledged by Kissinger. It has been acknowledged by the World Bank. There is a report by World Bank on this particular war. They have again, where they've again mentioned this. So if you see the link I put on the chat, if you just look at the chat on Zoom, I put a link there. This is a collection of all our documentation on Bangladesh. In that, if you go and see the article on the Bangladesh genocide, you will see that I've put the excerpts in that for this, the World Bank report and the exact statements of Kissinger and Gary J. Bass. It's called there was an article in New York Times, in fact, which was named "The Genocide That Nixon Ignored," something like that. And they removed it later on because I was trying to go into the archives on New York Times and I did not find that article anymore because they deleted it, but it used to be there. There is a copy of it in PDF or something. So if you see this particular article, this is the words of Teddy Kennedy. I mean, he was one of the most influential people in the Democratic government, where he has clearly written, hardest hit have been members of the Hindu community who have been robbed of their lands and shops, systematically slaughtered, and in some places painted with yellow patches marked H. H stands for Hindu. All of this has been officially sanctioned, ordered, implemented under martial law from Islamabad. So there are enough field reports to the US government, eyewitness journalist accounts. There was one journalist who documented this, and then his life was completely in danger. He had to flee. He was a Pakistani journalist, in fact, or he was at least on journalism assignment in Pakistan. He had to flee from Bangladesh to save his life, and then he finally went to UK, and then he wrote there in The Guardian. So all of these have been independently documented by several agencies. Now, if you read the World Bank report excerpt, I'm reading from that same page which I have linked. It says, perhaps the most impressive visit I made was one to this Thana office. 50% of the population of this Thana has fled. Some 20,000 out of a total of 42,000, mostly Hindus, leaving behind unattended plots of land, houses, etc. Everything had been disrupted there. The livestock officer had been killed, the whole administration was in chaos, the people bewildered. The whole works program had come to a stop. No laborers, no construction materials. Agriculture was in shambles, the people demoralized. It is doubtful whether any government can blah, blah, blah. So there's a whole report on this. I've just taken an excerpt. And there is a video also linked from Julian Francis, who was one of the people who actually documented this at that time. And he is one of the, there's also a book by Richard Benkin. I'm sure you would have heard of him. He is one of the most prominent researchers on this topic. He has documented the Bangladesh genocide. And now I'll come, I mean, I think by now at least people would have understood that have some very logical, very rational reasons for saying that Hindu community was targeted. It is not just because I'm a Hindu. It's not just because I generally talk about Hindus, but because we have enough evidence for it. And the second part I want to talk about it is why we should call it a genocide, and specifically that of Hindus, because you see there are 10 stages of a genocide. And this is given by the most prominent researcher in this field called Gregory Stanton. Now the irony is that Gregory Stanton himself is refusing to acknowledge the genocide of Hindus. It's a very big irony, in fact, considering that the last stage of genocide is denial. So he's actually fitting into his own pattern. But the fact remains that these 10 stages, there were originally 8, he upgraded it to 10 in the last 2 years. So I'll just read out the 10 stages of a genocide. This is straight from Wikipedia, so there's nothing very complicated here. Just putting the link on chat for anybody who wants to check it. So the first is called classification, like them and us, symbolization. When combined with hatred, symbols may be forced upon unwilling members of pariah groups. Discrimination, dehumanization, organization, polarization, preparation, persecution, extermination, and denial. So you can see classification, this is probably the most obvious one, because even now, even today in Bangladesh, Hindus are not treated the same way as Muslims in many parts of Bangladesh. Not maybe, maybe the capital city Dhaka may be a little bit more progressive, a little bit more liberal, but still in many parts of Bangladesh, situation is not particularly different. And we know exactly what it's an Islamic state. We know what Islamist ideologies believe about Hindus. We are already called as kafirs. And I'm not talking about something very new. So that itself, that tag of a kafir itself is a classification. That means, you're not one of us. That's classification. Civilization, when you force symbols on people, and we know that they already did that because they marked the Hindu houses with H. That's very clear targeting. And when they stop you from your religious practices, when they force you to remove your religious symbols, that is also kind of a symbolization, because you're forcing somebody to remove their religious symbols. So it's a different kind of a symbolization, but that is still symbolization. Discrimination, of course, we already know that there was a huge discrimination. Hindu shops were often targeted. They were often refused to do business with Hindu shops, and this pattern had been continuing since before even independence, since even before 1947. We saw the same kind of thing in the Noakhali genocide of 1946. Hindu shops were forced to shut down, and Hindu businesses were gutted. So this pattern, and Noakhali is in Bangladesh for those of you who don't know. So this pattern of discrimination, classification, all these things had been going on even before the 1971 episode. Dehumanization, we already know how they do this. Like, they don't believe we deserve the same kind of life. They don't believe we are at par with them. We are somehow lesser. That is what the term kafir itself means. We are somehow lesser as per that particular ideology. Organization is actually the most remarkable aspect of all of these, because nobody can just kill 3 million people ad hoc. It just does not happen. Maybe you can kill a few hundred people. Maybe you can, murder a few people. You can, get into a street fight and injure people. But you simply cannot murder 3 million people without organization. And we already know that this was a very organized crime, because it was a part of a war. And that war was half ideologically driven. So that organization is one of the most key aspects of this genocide, and one of the most important arguments for defining it as a genocide, because it has that element very, very obviously there. Polarization, we already know that it's not just along religious lines, but also along political lines in this particular war, because Hindus were seen as the people who wanted a separate state, who wanted Bangladesh to be freed of West Pakistan. So the polarization
बौद्धिक विकास हुआ उस देखो पॉलिटिकली कितना मुसलमान अवेयर है ना सारे हिंदू अवेयर नहीं है ना है कि सरकार बनाने का फायदा क्या है अपने विचार वाली
I'm sorry, but I'll remove anybody who cannot mute yourselves.
सारा हिंदू कभी नॉलेज फंस जाएगा.
I cannot speak if people are talking in parallel. I lose the thread of what I'm speaking. Right, so I was talking about polarization, and please don't mute me while I'm speaking. I just request everybody to mute yourselves, because I forget what I'm speaking if people start talking in parallel. I'm not speaking out of thin air. I have a very structured approach to this topic, and I'm going one by one. So, I need a little bit of concentration when I'm speaking. Right, I was talking about polarization, so I was explaining how there was political as well as religious polarization in this particular genocide, and it is undeniable. There is enough documentation. If I go into a lot of details, I will end up taking 1 hour, so I don't want to go that. There are some really good books. I see Sachi Dastidarji is also here. He has written a book on it as well. So there are enough books which have a whole lot of detail, a whole lot of facts which you can refer to. I'm giving a brief overview so you get an idea of why we should call it a genocide and that of Hindus, and what are the logical arguments for that, and what documentation exists for that. The seventh part is preparation. Now, again, this preparation also goes back to the fact that Hindu villages were targeted. Hindu homes were even clearly marked even before the actual rapes and the murders were carried out. And this again requires preparation. That means they knew who they were going to kill. They knew who they were going to target. They knew exactly what they wanted to do, and they had enough time to prepare for it. They knew that no help is coming because India joined this war very late. For a very long time, Bangladesh was battling on its own. Indian army came in very late for multiple reasons. I won't get into those reasons, but so for a long time, Bangladesh Hindus were pretty much helpless. I don't have any better word for that. And of course, persecution, extermination are very obvious. We know that at least 3 lakh Hindu women were raped by Pakistan army as well as extremists, but mainly Pakistan army. And there are some very gut-wrenching accounts of these rapes, which have been again documented in multiple places. So you see, even murder, even for once you can even explain that okay, murder is there are murders, there are killings in a war, but targeted rapes of women, there is no illogical any kind of argument which can justify rapes of women based on religious identity. This was not indiscriminate. And I want to emphasize this was not indiscriminate killing, this was not indiscriminate rapes, because the people who raped the women, they went to their homes first, they inquired about them, they asked them who they were, they obviously saw that they were Hindus, and then they came back later in the evening to rape them. So they did enough survey, they did enough homework before they went and committed those acts. So preparation, persecution and extermination are of course very, they're like just right there. So, if you see this 10-point thing which Gregory Stanton has given of classifying a genocide as a genocide, or what are the 10 stages of a genocide, this particular 1971 Hindu genocide fits the definition like a glove. It's ironical that Gregory Stanton does not want to accept his own parameters. Now, denial is the most important aspect of it because that's what Gregory Stanton is actually doing. But denial basically facilitates all the other 9 stages further, and the cycle continues. So what you see is that after 1971, it's not like the Hindu persecution actually stopped. It kept on and on and on, and this is the point at which I think I will share a slide where I've just put together a few. Let me see. Can you see my slides? Is it visible? Okay, fine. So if you see, okay, great. So this is just a very quick summary of the persecution of Hindu minorities in Bangladesh from like 1964 onwards. So this Dr. Barakat is one of the leading researchers who have done these calculations. Not my calculation, it's his calculation. But this is what he is presenting. That from 1964 to 2013, at least 11.3 million Hindus have left Bangladesh due to religious persecution. We are not saying they're going for economic opportunities. We're not saying they just like India, so they're going to India. We're not saying, they just decided to go on a long holiday. Religious persecution, they are refugees for all intents and purposes, except that UNHRC and all these other, international bodies have not given them the legal status of a refugee. They deserve the legal status of a refugee because when you flee a country because of religious persecution, because your life, your property, your well-being is in threat, that is when you qualify as a refugee. Otherwise, you're an immigrant. So they are refugees, but they have not been given that status as a refugee. And 22 indigenous groups have disappeared from the country. Now you should remember that Bangladesh was of course a part of Akhand Bharat until 1971, or in fact until 1947. It was very much a continuation of Bharat. So indigenous in this case means all the different communities, different tribes of Hindus, not any other community. So when we're talking about 22 indigenous groups, we do mean Hindu groups. We do mean Indian tribes who originally lived in that land. And 50 indigenous groups are on the verge of extinction. So this is a number I totaled from all the reports of over the years. There have been at least 3,679 attacks in 9 years. We're not saying 3,679 deaths. Attacks. In each attack, there are hundreds and hundreds of people murdered, hundreds of homes gutted, many women are raped. We're talking about just the number of attacks in 9 years, which is more than an attack per day for 9 years at a stretch, if you just do simple maths. So obviously the numbers have been dwindling there. This is the population chart, if you look at the screen. So this is the census. We obviously don't have any census for 1971 because that was the war year. They don't take census in that year. We only have a census of 1974. So if you see how much the total population has increased versus, how much, 1 second, I think. Can I just clear this screen? Yeah, see this. So if you see that, just see the total population increase and the Hindu population, which is a dark blue part. Hindu population is like 0.3%. The total population you can see from 44 to 65. And this is, I think, this total, I think this triangle is what? Yeah, that's the percentage of Hindus. So it's declined, you can see 18.5 to 13.5, but that's not a good enough measure. That's why I'm talking about the gray and blue bars, because gray bar is like Muslim population and dark blue is the Hindu population. You can see how the disproportionate increase and decrease here. I just want to clear the screen. I don't know how to clear the screen, it's not clearing it. Okay, so this is just some other statistics for further years. You can see the second chart. The dark blue is the reasons for migration as non-economic, and the rest is, other reasons. So dark gray is actually birth mortality rate is increasing. You can see that the reasons for non-economic reasons for migration have been increasing since even the last 2-3 decades, and this just goes on into the sorry. So that was just continuation of the report on further persecution in Bangladesh. But I think you got the idea of what I'm trying to convince. I just wanted to show the figures because I don't want to speak out of the top of my head. So what I'm trying to say is that, out of those 10 stages for genocide, the denial is the most important one, and there is a mass denial of the genocide of Hindus in Bangladesh in 1971. And when we have declared something like Partition Horrors Day in India, as August 14 today is Partition Horrors Remembrance Day. So as a part of that, we do need to remember how many of Hindus were persecuted in 1971 war also, and how that is a Hindu genocide also, and we need to officially declare it. 25th March 1971, the day the war started, should ideally be declared as Hindu Genocide Remembrance Day. And the onus lies on the Hindu community all over the world. So, I mean, this is, I don't want to go on because I know there are some other speakers also. So,
yeah, thank you, Arti ji, for a very statistical overview.
Yeah.
For a very statistical and very pinpointed, I would say, data points here, which are surely going to make our eyes go wide open. And when you said that August 14 has been, told as the Hindu Partition Day, where millions of Hindus lost their lives. And what we had Advocate Ankur Sharma ji saying is that we have to, the onus of this genocide has to be taken up by some institution, because the institutions, they perpetrated it, and then institutions kind of crumbled under the weight, or they could not face it. So Advocate Ankur Sharma ji, we're coming back to you. What is your thought that
before I hand over? So this is just information. I'm sorry, I just forgot. We are actually continuing this documentation of genocide in Bangladesh. We have just recently launched a new website. It's called bangladeshmirror.org. We have just created it. We are just updating it right now, but in a few days we will have a lot more information there. You can check it out. We will be documenting all violence, all crimes against Hindus in Bangladesh on this website. So I encourage everybody to please support us and to share it, and keep yourself informed. That's all. Thank you.
Before I share it with Advocate Ankur Sharma ji, I hand it over to him. I just would like to share two informations. In one of the slides, Arti ji mentioned that 25 indigenous, tribes vanished in the massacre. So we have basically India. There's a certain pattern. People associate more with their castes than with the religion itself. So when we say that 25 indigenous tribes, they vanished, they were part of Hindu religion, I'm very sure about it. So let us take that lesson, that this individualistic pride in castes than religion, when we take more pride in that, we are at a loss. We have to collectively see ourselves as Hindus and not regional Hindus, because our challenge for the last 1200 years has been a nexus of Abrahamic forces, I would say, or jihadi forces, which we have been fighting for 1200 years. And this pattern, I was reading one incident that one woman in Bangladesh, she was raped in front of her kids. She was told that if we don't rape you, we will throw your 2-year-old child into the fire. On that pretext, she was raped in front of her rest of the family. After that, she was made to lie with her back on embers, hot embers. So from ISIS to Bangladeshi genocide to whatever been done by people like Temur Lane, there's no difference. 1200 years, the pattern remained the same. Kashmir Valley, Kashmir files, we've seen the pattern remains the same. Only we trying to come face to face with the reality, we are surprised. And what is surprising me right now is that we are surprised that this 1200-year-old pattern is happening still today, and we are surprised about it. That is what is most shocking to me. Anyways, handing it over to Advocate Ankur Sharma ji, please.
I have already spoken earlier a lot on this issue, but I mean, some sort of a conclusion is required probably. I was not properly audible as well. I would like to request everybody again, because since Arti ji is doing it with a mission mode, she has institutionalized this thing. I mean, the kind of documentation, because we are in touch from so many years now. So I also would supplement her request and request everybody to help donate and contribute in any possible form for the task that Arti Agarwal ji has taken. She's doing a very noble job. We have been requesting people to connect to her, and now, I mean, the links are also shared and people will come to know about the kind of, marvelous work she's doing. Documentation of Hindu genocide, conceptualizing, etc., and fighting for it. Ultimately, we also are able to fight against the governments on the basis of kind of documentations done by people like Arti Agarwal ji. She's an institution in herself. And taking her, मैं अपनी पिछली बात को भी आगे इन्हीं की बात से लेके जाऊंगा. She also said, and we both agree, and in fact that's जो अपने experts on genocide है, they also say that the final stage of genocide इज डिनायल ऑफ जेनोसाइड। जब आप डिनायल करते हैं तो आप फिर से जेनोसाइड करते हैं, मतलब क्लाइमैक्स ऑफ जेनोसाइड इज डिनायल ऑफ जेनोसाइड। एंड आई वाज ट्राइंग टू एम्फसाइज दैट हिंदू जेनोसाइड के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में इट इज द स्टेट ऑफ इंडिया इटसेल्फ, द इंडियन स्टेट irrespective of the governments between 47 to 2022 as on date, जो डिनायल ऑफ हिंदू जेनोसाइड को इंस्टीट्यूशनलाइज करके बैठी हुई। सो माई ओनली आर्ग्यूमेंट एज फार एज दिस टुडेज प्रोग्राम इज कंसर्न्ड इज डॉक्यूमेंटेशन। तो सब आरती जी ने बात की, पूरा ग्राफिकल इमेजेस और बार डायग्राम्स एक्सेट्रा उससे बताया, पूरा डॉक्यूमेंटेशन एवरीथिंग। वी नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड कि सबसे बड़ा जो इंस्ट्रूमेंट है डिनायल ऑफ जेनोसाइड का, दैट्स द इंडियन स्टेट। So double genocide, killing twice, or मतलब unleashing genocide twice. So that is something we need to understand and appreciate. और जैसा मैंने पहले भी बताया कि चाहे 1947 की बात हो, 1971 की बात हो, उसके बीच के इंटरनल इश्यूज की बात हो, 1990s की बात हो, कश्मीर या पार्ट्स ऑफ जम्मू प्रोविंस की बात हो, एंड देन whatever is happening. एंड आरती जी would also agree with me कि बंगाल में भी जैसे इन्होंने political violence का नाम दिया post elections, that was also clearly Hindu genocide, अगर आप डेफिनेशन को सामने रख के। सो आपने देखा कि किस तरीके से डिनायल मोड को लेके रहते हैं। और मैं ये पहले भी अपनी ये बात कह रहा था कि वी नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड कि टू नेशन थ्योरी की बैकग्राउंड में जब भारत की सरकार ने तय किया कि जिन लोगों ने पाकिस्तान मांगा वो तो अभी हिंदुस्तान में ही है, क्योंकि पाकिस्तान बना वहां पे जहां पे पाकिस्तान की डिमांड नहीं थी, तो किस तरीके से इन मुसलमानों को यू विल बी इंडक्टिंग इन द नेशनल मेन स्ट्रीम। सो दे डिसाइडेड कि एक ही तरीका हो सकता है कि आप मुस्लिम हिस्ट्री, इस्लामिक हिस्ट्री को सेंटर स्टेज में रखें, उसे महान बनाएं। और वाईबी चौहान इज ऑन रिकॉर्ड टू से, और वो प्रूफ अभी कुछ समय में, मतलब वी आर ट्राइंग टू गेट, बट प्राइम ऑफ शाही वी आर कन्विंस्ड कि उनका तो ये मानना था, होम मिनिस्टर है, उनका ये भी मानना था कि अगर हिंदू हिस्ट्री को कुछ गलत भी लिखना पड़ता है यूनिटी के लिए हिंदुस्तान की, तो आप गलत भी लिखिए हिंदू हिस्ट्री के बारे में, उसे सेकेंड ऑर्डर में तो रखिए, प्राइमरीली आप ये। सो आई थिंक उसी कारण फिर पैन इस्लामिस्ट्स और कम्युनिस्ट्स को जो हमारे एजुकेशन सिस्टम्स और इंस्टीट्यूशंस ऑफ सारा ये एकेडमिया, इनका जो कंट्रोल दिया, उसके बाद ये सब चीजें होनी थी कि अल्टीमेटली इंडियन स्टेट भी डिनायल मोड में चली गई, बीइंग अ सिग्नेटरी टू द कन्वेंशन, यूएन कन्वेंशन ऑन जेनोसाइड जो है, इंडिया इज अ सिग्नेटरी बट ऑलवेज रिमेन्स इन डिनायल अबाउट ये दिस हिंदू जेनोसाइड। तो मुझे लगता है कि जब तक, जैसे कि आरती जी ने भी बताया कि मार्च 25 मार्च शी सेड प्रोबब्ली इफ आई कैन क्लियरली रिमेंबर 1971, इसको सो लेट एक बिगिनिंग होनी चाहिए। इफ द गवर्नमेंट, इफ द स्टेट ऑफ इंडिया इज नॉट विलिंग टू डिक्लेयर, एटलीस्ट वी शुड स्टार्ट कैंपेनिंग फॉर दिस, दैट सम डेट शुड बी फिक्स्ड, जिससे हम कह सके कि भाई ये होलोकास्ट रिमेम्बरेंस डे कह लीजिए, ये हिंदू जेनोसाइड डे कह लीजिए, किसी भी टर्मिनोलॉजी से बुला लीजिए, दैट शुड हैपन। सो इट इज द रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी ऑफ पीपल लाइक अस कि ये इंफॉर्मेशन ज्यादा से ज्यादा लोगों में फैले, और लोगों में तभी ये बात फैलेगी, लोग जिम्मेवारी तभी लेंगे जब ये समझ जाएंगे कि सबसे बड़ा सबवर्सिव इंस्ट्रूमेंट पर्दा डालने का, हिंदुओं पे जो अत्याचार हुए हैं उन्हें छुपाने का, इंडियन स्टेट ही रही है, इंडियन गवर्नमेंट्स ही रही है। So I think only thereafter probably things can be set right. So today's context of मेरी speech का यही था that we should know कि जैसा आरती जी ने बताया, final stage of genocide अगर denial है तो denial का सबसे बड़ा instrument, करने वालों से भी बड़ा instrument इंडियन स्टेट है। That is something we have to remember and we have to, मतलब इस तरीके से स्टेट से फाइट करनी है कि अल्टीमेटली इट रिकॉग्नाइजेस हिंदू जेनोसाइड। अ बिगिनिंग कैन बी डन, मोस्ट जो रिसेंट भी है और जिसके अधिक से अधिक प्रमाण पब्लिक डोमेन में भी अवेलेबल है, आप कश्मीर में और जम्मू संभाग में जो जेनोसाइड हिंदुओं के साथ हुआ उससे स्टार्ट कर सकते हैं। बांग्लादेश का भी है, 1947 का भी है, बंगाल का भी है, लेकिन मुझे लगता है कि सबसे अधिक डॉक्यूमेंटेशन जिसकी अभी फिजिकल एविडेंसेस ग्राउंड पे भी अवेलेबल है, किस तरीके से मंदिरों को तोड़ा गया, ऐसा तोड़ा गया कि प्लिंथ को भी उखाड़ा गया, और जो सैंक्टम सैंक्टोरम्स हैं उनका साथ जो हाल किया मैं बयान नहीं कर सकता यहाँ पे, जो लेवल ऑफ हेट्रेड टुवर्ड्स द कम्युनिटी दिखाता था। तो मुझे लगता है कि ये जिहाद, जेनोसाइड ऑफ हिंदूज, इसको एक प्रॉपर कॉन्टेक्स्ट में देखना चाहिए। सबसे बड़ी प्रॉब्लम, द प्रॉब्लम विद द इंडियन स्टेट even as on date is this: it does not want to call the problem by its real name. तो things perpetuate, ये सब चीजें होती हैं, and then nothing happens. genocide continues to go on. Genocide denied is genocide duplicated. Denial of genocide climax तो है ही, लेकिन अगर आप genocide को deny करते हैं, ये continuously चलता रहता है. और आपने जम्मू कश्मीर के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में देख लिया कि अभी भी जो हत्याएं हो रही हैं वो भी आप जेनोसाइड की स्टैटिस्टिक्स में ही डालेंगे. 1990s में जो शुरू हुआ था वो आपको अभी एक महीना पहले, 10 दिन पहले जितनी भी, चाहे वो बैंक मैनेजर की हत्या हो, चाहे वो प्रवासी मजदूरों की हत्या हो, चाहे वो हिंदुओं की हत्या हो, जो टीचर्स जम्मू संभाग से दलित समाज के कश्मीर में सर्व कर रहे हैं, उनकी टारगेटेड किलिंग्स हो, these are all instances of genocide, and it is happening because the state of India is in continuous denial of Hindu genocide. So denial of genocide मतलब genocide चलता रहेगा. I think that is something that I would like to.
Thank you, Advocate Ankur ji. We have also with us Ravi Ranjan sir. आप कुछ कहना चाहेंगे क्या इस पॉइंट पे? आपका आवाज, you are muted. 1 second, sorry.
As if we have different guests, उनको भी थोड़ा बोलने का मैं सुनना चाहूंगा, और बोलना तो खैर बोल ही देंगे.
So I would like to invite Rinita Mazumdar ji.
Hello.
Glad to have her here. So Rinita ji, just a minute, I have to unmute you. Give me 1 second.
Versus ji, I want to say.
Just 1 second ji. Hanji.
I have to say only for 1 second or 2 seconds or 3 seconds.
Hanji, please go ahead.
Please, my video on my video. Hello.
Yes.
Hanji, who's speaking? Sorry, let me.
Me here, Ashish Anand Bhatt from Jammu Kashmir.
Hanji, Ashish ji, are you able to speak? We can hear you loud and clear. Please go ahead.
I want to say 2 things that which is very important, that we have to make a document on a book, just like Arti Agarwal already said that we should have a document. But I would like to say them that please make a book on a genocide. Please launch a book, and I would request to Ankur Sharma ji also launch a book on the basis of ethics of genocide of Hindus in all over the world, or in the Asian continents, or in the outskirts of the countries of the India and outer countries. So right from the 1947, whatever happened to the Hindus, like we are speaking about the genocide, which is very true. So I would like to, I am requesting to the Ankur ji, please launch a book. If you can do this with the authentic documents, just like we have with the photo images. And I would like to say, Arti Agarwal, please launch a book upon you have already worked on this. So I would request, this is my suggestion.
It's not something you can cover in a book. This is a book series which I'm working on, but it will take time because I want it to be incontrovertible. I don't want to, just write some fluff. Because if I'm writing something, it needs to be research based. Otherwise, there's no point in writing it. So I'm already working on that. It will take some time for it to be out, but you will probably hear whenever it is published. Thank you.
One more thing I would like to suggest to anybody. Hindus have a very beautiful tendency of suggesting people, oh, maybe somebody should do this. यहाँ पर कोई कुछ नहीं करने वाला है. In case you start doing something, I will make sure that there will be support for you. So let us stop this habit of having a 11-player cricket team where there is one player and 10 captains. Somebody wants to start something, sir, madam, please go ahead. We'll make sure that if your effort is authentic, genuine, we will raise support for you. बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. Rinita ji, can you please take
only one.
Yeah, Rinita ji, can you please take the mic?
Yes. I was not prepared for this, so I did present on a psychoanalytic. My interest is psychoanalysis and feminism. I teach both of those, and I do practice psychoanalysis on the partition and so forth. So I don't have a lot to say, but I'll share my experience. And a while ago, we heard that the worst thing than genocide is the silence around genocide. And this, for me, is a very interesting issue for all oppressed groups. Because the worst thing is when your oppression is being denied. And thus happened to slaves, that happened to women, and so forth. So it's actually, this should be part of the subaltern studies. It's not, because the left in India is totally corrupt, and I was part of the left. So I will speak about my experience starting when I started this research, which is about 2018. So I got a grant. I live in New Mexico, which is a state right above Texas, where is already a field of genocide denial of the Native American. So the field is already there. Now, so when I started doing research in 2019, I applied for a one-day event grant to do a genocide on Kashmiri, the situation in Kashmir. So I did a lot of research, and then I contacted two Kashmiris, authentic Kashmiris, if you want to say. It was in the Peace and Justice Center, which is a very progressive center, progressive liberal center in Albuquerque, which itself is a pretty progressive city. So I got a one-day grant, and Shakuntala and Shunanda Vashisht, who gave her testimony about Kashmiri Hindu genocide in front of an audience, and they were there. And at that point, I realized the uphill battle that we have to fight for to make this a mainstream narrative. But it's possible, because others have, from what I understand from my study of left politics, it's always like that. So what happened is, a woman who claims that she's from India, Hyderabad, I don't know where she's from, and she claims to be a journalist, she stormed in uninvited in my Kashmiri Hindu presentation. She was not invited. First of all, she accused me of not inviting her. I said I did not invite anyone. Peace and Justice Center, who gave me a grant to do this, they invited. They put out flyers, because that's their rule. They typically take emails from the community and they distribute it. They distribute it to their own members and so forth. So you're targeting at a wrong person. First, she accused me, and then one thing and another, she actually physically tried to attack me, saying I'm peddling lies. And then she challenged Shunanda Vashish that she's not a real Kashmiri. She's faking as one. So it kind of went in a very bizarre way, to the point where when she I think she threw a piece of furniture or something at me, we had to call police, we had to call the security, and then eventually she was escorted out of the seminar, the hall where the seminar was. Now, the two Kashmiris, Shakuntala and Shunanda, they were there via the internet. They were not physically present there. So anyway, so that happened, and then it was all over Albuquerque. I remember about 4 months later, I met the head of the Department of Feminist Studies, because I applied and got another grant, very small one, from the Feminist Research Institute of the University of New Mexico. I'm a full-time in the New Mexico Community College, and I'm an adjunct in University of New Mexico in the Women's Studies. So I got a small grant there to do a one-day event on I called it the civilizational genocide, or cleansing rather. It is well documented and well researched. It's in the University of Birmingham in England about the abduction and rape and conversion of Hindu girls in Sindh. And this is very well documented. It's not something out of the blue. And we did research, and the grant was given. And then then right before the event, it was cancelled without any reason. So I went to the dean and I told the dean that this is unfair. I wasn't given a reason why it was cancelled, and she was evasive. She was not supportive. Anyway, so I reapplied for the Kashmiri Hindu, and we got it. And we had to actually do, that's also from the Feminist Research Institute. And at this time, Shakuntala and Shunanda Vashisht actually traveled to Albuquerque to do their presentation with me. But the Sindh one got cancelled, but this one didn't for whatever reason. I don't know. Maybe the dean told them something. They traveled to New Mexico and we did it, but we had heavy security posted outside. The day after that, we did the same event in the Hindu temple in New Mexico, and there were some threat phone calls, and we had to post security outside. So even talking about the genocide, we have to put security. I mean, this is far beyond anything I imagined. So it's almost like it's more than bizarre. It's becoming what I don't know. What Shakespeare would call this, I don't know. And then I did more and more and more research, and I'm convinced it's faith-based hatred. It's based on ethnic cleansing, and ultimately my recent conclusion through psychoanalytic study, it is a civilizational war. But that's not my point today, because I wasn't prepared to talk. But all these events have been happening since 2018 when I started speaking, and this is very typical of any subaltern. A slave is a very good slave so long he doesn't start speaking. This is Aristotelian. Now, very recently something happened, and now I'm thankful in a way that it happened, because it gave me more impetus to fight. Gautam Ghosh has very interesting short documentary, which I'm going to put in the chat box, on the declining that Arti spoke about, on the ethnic cleansing of Hindus in Bangladesh. So I'll put that and other stuff. I put everything together and put in an international panel called Community Building, or it's a very liberal international panel, and they really liked it. And
Rinita ji, I think your work with the psychoanalytical part is going to be very interesting if we superimpose it with the analytics that Arti ji is doing.
Yeah.
And give it a very behavioral, statistical overview, the way it can be presented in UN and other assemblies. So I think this meeting, we have one additional plus, which was, which we couldn't see coming, is that how we can collaborate, teams working with different perspectives and aspects, so that it becomes more impactful also for our well-read, youth who are turning left-leaning because our documentation is not proper, basically. So thanks a lot. And with this, I'm concluding today's live stream. Very much thankful to the Global Hindu Council, to Dharmic Awareness Group, Unapologetic Hindu, hinduhub.org, and Dismantle Hinduphobia for being a co-participant, co-host in this teamwork. And let's keep the flame alive. If you have a flag with you, please bring it forth so that we can have a common photo. If you have it somewhere in the vicinity, sir, we can close the